Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to MitoAction's monthly expert series. Today, Reenie McCarthy, along with Shelley Bowen, are joining us to discuss ultra-rare mitochondrial diseases, development challenges, and opportunities. My name is Stephanie Harry. I'm one of the patient support coordinators at MitoAction and will be your host for today. Reenie McCarthy is the Chief Executive Officer and member of the board of Stealth Biotherapeutics. She has extensive experience working with private, non-clinical, and clinical stage companies developing drugs across a broad spectrum of therapeutic areas. Shelley Bowen is the Director of Family Services and Advocacy for the Barth Syndrome Foundation. Both Reenie and Shelley have worked very hard to help educate and discuss health equity challenges faced within the ultra-rare disease space. Today's presentation will be recorded and available on MitoAction's website in the coming days, as well as on our podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in via phone, please feel free to submit your questions to us by email at info@mitoaction.org, and we'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible at the end of today's presentation. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thank you for taking this time to share and educate, and we're very much looking forward to this presentation.
Thank you so much. I can't say how much I appreciate MitoAction for partnering with us, both at Stealth and with BSF as well, to amplify the voice of ultra-rare disease patients. Many mitochondrial diseases are ultra-rare. So, I'm thrilled to be here with this community. I'm a big supporter and really, really appreciate you sharing your time with us today.
All right, we do too, for sure. I'm happy to be here, and I'm glad it worked out for us to be able to be on this call today.
Yeah, so thanks everyone. With that, I'm going to pull up some slides, and hopefully I will not have technical difficulties doing it. If you give me a minute. This is going to take me a minute before I can actually see the slideshow mode, so hopefully I can pull that up for you. Okay. So what we're going to be talking about today is patient voice always matters in drug development, but it really, really matters in ultra-rare drug development. And my goal is to kind of give you some lessons learned as to why ultra-rare is so challenging and why the patient voice is so important, and how with patients alongside us, we can hopefully develop some strategies to progress the needle a little bit in ultra-rare. So in terms of why ultra-rare is so important, I would say the biggest issue is finding enough patients to enroll in a clinical development program. Ultra-rare by its nature means very few patients, and so that's really the biggest challenge. There are others, including the fact that disease awareness, including in the literature, isn't great. And so you've got a bit of an uphill battle educating a number of stakeholders, but among the most important stakeholders from an education perspective is the FDA. And that can take years. Barth Syndrome Foundation has literally met with FDA 4 or 5 times, in addition to attending all of our meetings, to try to educate on Barth syndrome. FDA does have the flexibility to interpret small data sets in different ways in ultra-rare diseases, and if they're serious, but its use of regulatory flexibility can be pretty inconsistent. And I would say the other large challenge in ultra-rare is actually getting somebody to invest in it because of all of these challenges. In terms of strategies to overcome these barriers, as I said, I think the biggest for us is early partnering with patient advocacy, as well as, continually trying to publish and get more disease education and awareness out into the literature. I will spend a little time today talking about expanded access, which for us was really important. We were studying in our clinical program boys affected with Barth syndrome age 12 and up, because going beyond that would have introduced more variability into the data. But expanded access for us gave us the opportunity to understand how to dose younger children, which is pretty important. 85% of early deaths in Barth syndrome occur by the age of 5. So it was a good way for us to understand how to dose younger children. So FDA understands that there is an issue with ultra rare diseases. What you're looking at right here is a quote from Janet Woodcock, who is currently the Deputy Commissioner of the FDA. And she's acknowledging that there's a problem with ultra rare at the FDA, and yet also that we can't just tell patients abandon all hope and we'll never get any treatments for you. What does ultra rare even mean? There isn't a definition in the US. If you borrow the European definition, you're looking at diseases affecting less than 6,000 Americans. Many of you folks may know we're in a clinical trial in mitochondrial myopathy that's enrolling patients with nuclear DNA mutations. That probably falls within the 6,000 number. Friedreich's ataxia is right around there as well. Some rare disease advocates are suggesting ultra rare be defined as affecting less than 2,000 Americans. And the reason for that is that's 1% of the 200,000 cutoff for rare disease. What I will say is, irrespective of which definition you pick, many rare mitochondrial diseases fall into this bucket. Besides Barth syndrome, I can TK2, Pearson syndrome, Menji. There are many others that I haven't listed. So this is an issue in the primary mitochondrial disease patient population that, again, many of the syndromes and diseases would qualify as ultra rare. Why is it so important to get approvals? Beside the obvious that all patients deserve therapies that can hopefully improve their lives, breakthrough approvals have actually driven more innovation historically. So looking back to the first approvals for MS and ALS in the mid-90s to today, we see really much more picking up steam in terms of more development, more drugs getting approved. And with DMD, the first approval in 2016, now less than 10 years later, we have 5 drugs approved. So getting that first one across the line helps to set the regulatory precedent, and it also helps to take down some of the regulatory uncertainties so that more development dollars can go to a disease. The goal for rare diseases is that there are multiple drugs available for patients. No single drug, well, most single drugs will not help everybody, and they won't always help every aspect of a disease. So ideally, you would want multiple therapies available.
There's no therapies.
Sorry, I'm going to play this brief clip to characterize Barth syndrome from the perspective of a family.
There's no therapies at all for Barth syndrome. Our son's living with it daily. We just need something.
Hey guys, I'm Abe.
Hi, I'm Erin, and I'm Abe's mom.
Hi, I'm Brian, and I'm Abe's dad. Abe is living with a rare condition called Barth syndrome.
From the very beginning, since Abe was born, we had instinctually thought that something was not right. He was in severe heart failure. It kind of set in that we need to be asking about how do we fix this? And there isn't a fix.
It does affect my energy, muscles, and height, meaning that I can't do some things as well as you guys can.
We really are looking and hopeful for treatments and therapies that can help. These are boys and men who have so much to contribute to society. The will to live, the will to participate in life is definitely there. It's the inability that they can't because of their medical condition.
So I know in this community, that's a story that will certainly resonate. I'm going to move on to kind of why it's just so hard in ultra rare diseases. It's really a statistical issue. If you think about developing a drug for heart failure, those clinical trials are usually going to enroll 6,000, 10,000 patients. And with that many patients, you can detect an effect size. If you're looking at 10 or 12 or even 20 patients, you need to have a massive effect of the therapy to see any separation. And when we think about statistics for FDA, they're really looking for a magic p-value, a probability value of less than 0.05. And again, that's really, really hard to reach in very small clinical trials. Barth syndrome is an ultra-rare disease that affects less than 250 people in the world, less than 130 in the US. there's only 2 multidisciplinary centers treating the disease. So finding patients can be difficult. And even among the 150 to 250 patients, whether you're looking at US or worldwide, not everyone is going to be eligible or able to participate in a clinical trial. You can have variability of disease presentation at different ages. As I mentioned, we were treating ages 12 and up to try to get a more consistent group. Many patients with Barth syndrome, for example, have had heart transplants, making them, not good candidates for a clinical trial. So again, it's hard to get enough patients in ultra rare diseases. And with that, you get into a situation from a regulatory perspective where if you're trying to get more data, it may just not be possible to do. Since our first meeting with the FDA to talk about these clinical data in 2019, Barth Syndrome Foundation has said that about 10% of the patient population has unfortunately been lost. So time also does matter for patients. A big barrier to innovation in ultra rare, and I would say this is certainly something we encountered in Barth syndrome. I think from my work in mitochondrial disease generally, I think it's an issue more broadly for mitochondrial diseases. Some diseases are just better understood than others, including by the FDA. So for example, FDA has specific guidance on diseases of enzyme deficiency, giving fast track approval processes or accelerated approval processes because they understand how those drugs work and they understand how those diseases work. We're seeing emerging data in the scientific literature for ALS, which has also facilitated faster approvals there. But I think even within the mitochondrial community, you might have some folks saying, what is cardiolipin, which is really what is the problem in Barth syndrome. These patients have a defect which causes abnormal levels of cardiolipin. And so it's really a big educational barrier for the FDA to get their arms around how Barth syndrome works. And again, I think that applies more broadly to other rare mitochondrial diseases as well. Financing does become an issue here to attract investment dollars. It costs about $100 million typically to develop a drug for a rare disease. If you're a company like mine, you have to do what's called a SWOT analysis. So look at the strengths. Here we had mechanistic plausibility and a highly motivated patient advocacy group. The weaknesses, that poor understanding of the disease, as well as unvalidated animal models and lack of regulatory precedent. There are opportunities. We had a lot of regulatory designations, and we do think the diagnostic journey could be improved. But again, the powering considerations and the regulatory uncertainty really combine to make it a challenging investment thesis. And that is only exacerbated by regulatory inconsistency. So our experience was that Barth Syndrome Foundation asked us to consider development efforts. It was actually Shelley who came to us in 2014. We did do a placebo-controlled clinical trial. We treated patients for 3 months. We did not meet the primary endpoints in that trial. It was too short, we believe. And with longer term therapy and open label extension, we were seeing that's about a 25% 100-meter mean improvement in 6-minute walk test, which was sustained over a period of about 4 years. We followed FDA guidance and did a retrospective natural history control trial where you're essentially comparing that open label data to patients in the natural history. That was positive, so we wouldn't expect those changes from the natural history. But in 2021, the FDA refused to file and review our new drug application. In 2022, we actually were starting to see changes in heart function, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, as well as in the abnormal cardiolipin ratio. And so went back into the agency, but our most recent meeting really confirms that there's no clear regulatory path forward. Our possible next steps may be to just resubmit the NDA. We did think we had a path, so it's ready to go. It is probably likely that we'll get another refusal to review. And, while that can be appealed, it's pretty infrequent that appeals end up in a positive place. So program termination is certainly on the radar screen for us as well.
Can we
We did patient perception of change video protocols For us, this was intended to inform clinical relevance to patients of their trial experience. FDA subsequently published guidance, essentially mimicking the protocol that we adopted and saying that it was useful. I will tell you that this was one of the reasons we hung in with this development program after the phase 2 top-line data wasn't positive. So I'll play you this.
Activity like walking the dog would normally take me hours to recover. I'd come home, I'd lay down, sometimes even go to sleep afterwards, and even then wake up tired. And now it's a matter of minutes before I've almost fully recovered. So that's the big one for me, is the recovery is fantastic.
Ability to recover quickly has increased, and his stamina has increased up to the point that he's almost matches his brother, who is not affected by Barth.
I don't see him inside avoiding his friends. He's out there keeping up with them, and that alone, that it's just normal, is a blessing.
So again, for us coming out of, a trial where we didn't see what we hoped in 3 months, but we were starting to see changes in open label, that contextualization from patients was really important to kind of keep us in the game and keep working on this. I mentioned the need to educate the FDA. So 35 peer-reviewed publications have been published since 2020. There have been multiple presentations. And here again, Barth Syndrome Foundation has been amazing, meeting independently 4 times with the FDA to educate on the disease. We also followed the data long-term. And so, as I mentioned, Barth is a disease of cardiolipin deficiency. We are seeing, improvements in those cardiolipin ratios over time. And interestingly, I think this has helped FDA to some extent in their understanding of some of the data. I mentioned that we did a natural history control study. So the gold standard is a placebo control, but for rare and ultra rare diseases, there is regulatory precedent and approvals, as well as guidance saying that, baseline controls, single arm studies, or even natural history controls can be suitable. We did follow FDA guidance. This study was positive, but I would say that FDA receptivity to these types of data can vary by division. So for example, neurology recently looked at data like this in the context of the Reata approval, but in the division of cardiology, they've not been willing to review these data. This, again, can be inconsistent across the agency. So FDA itself has published a review of its use of regulatory flexibility and concluded that it is highly inconsistent. You can see from this chart in other ultra rare diseases, even where single arm trials, so no placebo control, no predefined hypothesis, bias in the endpoint assessments, and not even positive data has in some cases supported drug approvals. Another thing that was, really useful for us with the long-term follow-up is we saw something unexpected. We saw cardiac function measured by left ventricular stroke volume. So essentially that's how much blood is coming into the heart and then getting pumped out to perfuse your organ systems. We saw a greater than 40% improvement in that with very long-term elamipretide therapy. So this is about 4 years in open label. And we were able, because the Barth syndrome community, including external thought leaders, have been very collaborative, we were able to better understand in the natural history what happens in older boys with this disease is that typically you would expect that to decline. So again, that brings me to probably the key strategy, which is partnering with patient advocacy and with patients. From us, that happened right from the beginning. It was Shelley who came to us and asked us to start work. And then that's continued, all the way through, including in all of our regulatory interactions. I think another key learning is that we often don't collaborate enough. I think in industry, we're particularly guilty of that. Here, in many ways, collaboration has really helped elucidate what we were seeing. Certainly, broad data sharing by multiple different sources of natural history, which helped us inform that cardiac signal we saw. And I think the other thing is talking about shared failures or struggles. So Congress is responsible for FDA, the FDA oversight. They appropriately do not want to talk about program specific or like drug specific development. They want to understand policy needs. And yet, I think we all have a tendency of not wanting to be critical of FDA because you don't want an adversarial relationship, which is appropriate. That said, I think sharing some of the struggles and challenges more broadly helps to inform whether policy changes are actually needed. And so again, big kudos to groups like Barth Syndrome Foundation and Mito Action for serving as a forum to connect companies to share about some of these issues, which again could affect many of us. In terms of amplifying the patient voice, I mean, again, this is kind of what I just said. Congress really is responsible for FDA oversight. Shelley is going to talk about all that BSF is doing to bring these challenges to Congress, and media can also help inform both Congress and FDA. I would say, why is the patient voice so important? After about a year of my meeting with various legislators on the Hill, and there were a lot of meetings over the course of a year, in a matter of weeks, Shelley and one Barth Syndrome family in upstate New York met with a rep in upstate New York and secured a resolution in the House to acknowledge Barth Syndrome Awareness Day. So patients are just much more credible, as they should be. Tell your story, your voice, what you think about a given situation. Legislators will listen to you. Your voices are very powerful. I think that another way is direct contact to the FDA. And this is really just a historical case study. When the Exondys approval happened in 2016, Commissioner Califf received almost 3,000 emails from patients. So it does help inform when there's policy issues to be aware of. My top line takeaway is, we should communicate more amongst each other as a rare disease community about the challenges that we're facing. And with that, we can better inform advocacy for change. As I turn this over to Shelley, I'm going to play a brief clip from a recent Barth Syndrome webinar, which actually informed us of an expanded access case. It's one of the ones I mentioned where it gave us some dosing experience with younger patients with Barth Syndrome. And I'm going to tee this up before turning the microphone over to Shelley.
My name is Dr. Amy Goldstein. I'm the clinical director of the CHOP Mitochondrial Medicine Program here in Philadelphia. Relatively new to the Barth Syndrome space. The opportunity to meet a patient with Barth Syndrome who came to CHOP this winter, who was in heart failure, and then the genetic testing came back positive for Barth Syndrome. Our patient was quickly declining, was on ECMO, then needed a ventricular assist device. The children who develop cardiomyopathy, even if it's severe, many of them can be controlled with medication and time, and that there is a spontaneous recovery. However, the children that needed to go onto a ventricular assist device, a VAD, that none of them, to their knowledge, got explanted, and they all needed to go on and receive a heart transplant. And so, armed with that information, we wanted to ask the question of, could we provide Elamipretide to this child? Stealth Biotherapeutics helped us immensely put together an emergency use, single-use IND for the purpose of treating this one patient with Barth Syndrome. And that got approved basically within 24 hours. And we were able to start drug by mid-January. And our patient stabilized, and I think I will save the best results for his mother to update all of us on his current status.
My name is Jamie Dubuque, and I'm the mother of Declan, who was ill beyond our understanding and diagnosed with Barth syndrome earlier this year at 11 months old. When we learned of his diagnosis, it sounded like there couldn't be a worse sentence for our baby. When offered the rare opportunity to receive the drug under compassionate use, we went into the process hopeful, but anticipated seeing only some heart improvement over time. What we have received from accepting this opportunity turned out to be much more significant to Declan's hospitalization, recovery journey, and quite frankly, his existence. And the story of his heart recovery is one for the books. On May 1st, 3.5 months on the drug, his heart was back to normal size and function. It is our understanding that it was very early to see improvement in a heart as sick as Declan's. Today, at 18 months old, Declan is just days away from being discharged from PCH with his native heart, all while living his life with the endurance, energy, and spirit of a healthy child.
The information that I have is that we would not have predicted that he would have spontaneously resolved once the VAD was in, that everyone, both here at CHOP and now at his home institution, were thinking he would still need to be listed for a transplant, and we thought that would be the ultimate outcome.
So with that, I'm going to turn over the microphone to Shelley.
Thank you, Reenie. I appreciate it. I agree. I think that, what Reenie was saying, it's really important to work together, especially when we're, such a rare group. And I do appreciate Mito Action jumping in and helping us out in our advocacy efforts. I do have one thing to say about Dr. Goldstein's statement, though. She said that it was her understanding that kids who came off of a VAD would require a transplant. That's the way they got off of it. I would say they get a transplant or they die. And that has been, I think, with transplants, there is a shortage of organs, and it's ultimately you want to keep your native heart for as long as you can. And because once you get that transplant, you now have another condition if you are lucky enough to get a heart. In my case, I lost a son while he was waiting for a heart. So the fact that not only did this you're looking at get off of a VAD, but go home with his native heart and is doing well and doing what every toddler should do, and that is to drive his mother crazy, is to us a wonderful story. So we, to talk a little bit more about our advocacy efforts, we really kicked in heavy starting in early August. We have been talking with the FDA. We've had numerous discussions, as Reenie previously outlined, with the FDA. We had a PFDD meeting, which was no small undertaking, and we happened to do it during a conference, which was like landing a train in the middle of a conference. But we did it because we never shy away from a challenge. So we started thinking, okay, how do we really get attention? We've already done one petition, which was about 4,500 signatures on that petition to appeal to the FDA to accept an NDA. Now we wanted to go bigger and have even more of an effort. So we decided to feature this story, and we felt that it was really important for this to come from us. So it was the family story, but it was coming from us to say, this is representative of what we're up against. We're an ultra rare condition, and this is what we're up against. So we started this petition on September the 12th, and we currently have, I think now we're a little bit even above this signatures daily. And this is a snapshot that I took yesterday. So we're now close to 19,000. Change.org, we did not set this goal. I just want to say that Change.org just really has, it keeps up in the ante. So right now we're at 25,000 for the next goal. You can go in and you can certainly sign the petition and ask that the FDA give fair and equitable review for this drug. We are not asking FDA to approve the drug. We are not going to our legislators and asking them to ask FDA to approve it, but we are saying that the system that we have right now in the United States for the review of indications, promising indications like Lamipretide for Barth syndrome, it's not working. It's just not working. So again, go in there, you can do this, or if you can do the next slide, Reenie, please. The other thing is, I guess one thing where it works in our favor is if you go to change.org, you can just type in Barth syndrome and you'll find us. So that's pretty easy too. So you can just type it in, go there, and you can vote for us. It definitely is getting a lot of attention. We're planning on, we're doing a timeline right now on our website, and we hope to have that up and going by next week, hopefully by the end of the weekend, and we'll be able to share that out to Mito Action and to our community. And then there's another website that we're working on right now that is that has more of the details that you can follow and know what you can do to help the advocacy effort. So next slide, thank you. So our advocacy effort, I can tell you that I feel like I've aged. I need to invest in some under cream, eye cream, because it's just, we are rare. We're a staff of 4. And we have really pushed hard. And Emily Milligan, who is my colleague and comrade in everything we have done, we have been pushing hard on in the meetings, and we have tag team, just like we've done with Reenie and I on this call, where we have said, you handle this, I'll handle this. And so we have brought in our families, and this is just a few snapshots of some of the things that we've shared on social media. And we have created these individual tiles where we have tagged every one of the legislators' assistants, the legislative assistants, or whoever we've met with, if they happen to be on LinkedIn, and shared it out on whatever it's called now, X, I guess, or on Facebook. 27 states. We haven't given up. We have requested 178 meetings. Haven't been able to get all of them, but we did manage 3 meetings. And we have felt like we have been, the families who have really stepped up have said, I really felt like my legislator or the person who works for my elected official is listening. And yesterday I got a cold call, I almost didn't pick it up, but it was from one of the representatives' offices who called and said, hey, what's going on with that letter that you told us that Senator Braun was going to be leading, that it was going to go to the FDA? And it really made my day, because I felt like, gosh, it's so tiring, and you're saying the same thing. And, we're just looking, we want bicameral, bipartisan support in this letter to ask the FDA, where do you stand in your review of ultra rare drug indications? Because we're not seeing this work for us. We're not really feeling like this is happening for us. I kind of use the analogy that with this study, it kind of feels like name that tune, right? So you didn't know it was going to take that long for you to see a difference. And we're being penalized and being told, well, you didn't name that tune and 5 notes. So no, you get no therapy. And that's not fair. That's not fair. This is a tune that has never been heard before. We have learned so much through this study. So I think that, we just need to the FDA needs to do things differently. They need to understand people with ultra rare conditions are living and new survivors in this country. And they need to exercise the flexibility that they've been given. But ultimately, you are the experts in your story. And that's why it's really important to step forward and not put this on someone else. If you want therapies, you've got to have your voice heard. So we're kicking it, and we only have 137 people in the United States. So we're doing it. Not everybody is able to step forward. Some people are not doing well. So with that, I just say, let's move forward and work together. That's it for me.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you for all the information and everything that you're doing during this effort, and all the education that you're doing is so important. We've had some questions filter through, so I want to make sure that we go ahead and ask them. The first question is, why did the FDA refuse to consider your application? So I'm curious if you can just provide some more details about that directly.
Yeah, absolutely. FDA told us that we didn't submit an application that had a well-controlled clinical trial in it for them to review that was positive. And so our application included data from the open label portion of our first trial, which was essentially controlled by patients' own baselines, as well as a phase 3 retrospective natural history control trial, which did follow FDA guidance. FDA didn't like the natural history control trial because we were essentially assessing patients on elamiprotide who knew they were on elamiprotide, how they performed on 6-minute walk and muscle strength and balance against natural history controls who wouldn't have expected to be on any drugs. So they thought that introduced bias. I would just note that FDA guidance says that bias can be overcome by large enough effect sizes, and that FDA also had pointed to objective evidence as potentially helping to overcome bias. And we've now seen a more than 45% improvement in left ventricular stroke volume, which is inherently objective. But that was the reason. They didn't like the natural history control design. And again, it's one of those cases where in other divisions for other ultra rare diseases, drugs have been accepted, reviewed, and even approved on the basis of that type of a trial design. There just is inconsistency that happens from a flexibility perspective.
I think that's terrifying for me. Like, I mean, not that I want to instill fear, but the notion that that they're not accepting the natural history component of it, and knowing that, that's, do you know who instituted, was it the FDA that instituted that they should be taking that into account? Because I know other diseases are able to use the natural history component. And
Yep, there's guidance that was published by the FDA in 2019, use of natural history for rare diseases. It does say that both, again, patients' own baseline controls, so single-arm trials in some cases where the disease course is well understood, and or natural history control trials can be used for approval, but it's subject to FDA discretion. And again, really kind of depending on some factors like, can bias properly be overcome? Should be able to be with a large enough effect size, but again, that's just an area that we thought it would be at least a review issue, to be honest with you, but that's just not what we got. We got a refusal to even review the data.
so basically what you guys are asking for right now is for them to review the data. Okay.
Yeah.
So another question that came through was, when you meet with Congress about elamiprotide and Barth, do you also address elamiprotide and nuclear primary mitomyopathy mutations, or are you just speaking on Barth?
We're pretty much speaking on Barth syndrome because you go, Shelley, actually go.
I'll go and then you go. We'll tag team. We're pretty good at tag teaming. So for us, we talk on Barth because that's what we know. I would, if I were to meet with a legislator that where I had somebody else and they had a different condition, they were co-advocating with us, I would leave that to them because they know their story. I think, I can speak to what we're doing in the meetings, but Reenie, tag. Okay.
Yeah. So for us, this is Barth. In primary mitochondrial myopathy, we did not hit our primary endpoint in a phase 3 controlled placebo-controlled trial. We were studying too heterogeneous a basket of mutations. But there's enough patients out there with primary mitochondrial myopathy that we were able to design a new phase 3 program, go back into the clinic, focusing on the nuclear mutations. That trial's fully enrolled and we're waiting on data. So that was not a situation where we felt we had a battle, or, that we felt we had a situation that we needed to push for a different flexibility. We clearly could do another clinical trial, and we did. In Barth syndrome, it's different, right? We've actually suggested multiple protocols to the FDA over the past 5 years, and none of them have been accepted, largely due to powering concerns. And so we just feel like here we have no place to go. So our conversations are on Barth syndrome, but Congress doesn't like disease specific or product specific, nor should they. So we do contextualize this more broadly within the realm of other diseases that are ultra rare, where we know there have been similar development challenges. I would say that TKT2 deficiency is one of those, and it's one of those I've mentioned when I've spoken to Congress.
So if I have primary mitochondrial myopathy and I'm on Elameprotide, I could absolutely partner with you guys in trying to educate my legislators about the effects that it's even had on my own life.
Absolutely.
Shelley, you were talking a little bit earlier when we were chatting about that, about the importance of advocates sharing from their own space and their own stories. And I'm curious if you could speak a little bit about that here, about as you talk to your legislators, like what can you speak on and what shouldn't you speak on?
Yeah, so when we request a meeting, we request most of the meetings have been requested on behalf of a constituent. So we have done the legwork to reach out to these to the legislator's office. And most of the time you're going to meet with staff, which is fine. But, you know, as somebody said, if you've watched enough Veep, you know that they're doing the work anyway. So, you know, it's just we ask them to meet with us about the challenges that we have encountered with the FDA and getting a promising therapy across the threshold. We make it clear that we're not asking them to approve a drug. We are asking them for fair and equitable review, because, you know, it can't be equal to the gold standards of the clinical trials for much larger conditions, for ultra rare conditions. So it has to be equitable. It has to be, they do have to exercise their flexibility. We can go so far as to say, this is how this affects us. We have people who have been on drug who have said, this is what my life is going to be like. We have Jamie who has been on calls to say, I fear for my son's life. And that is her lived experience with this. We have parents who have lost their children who said, I would give anything to have had this, to have tried this. But it's our stories, it's our lived experience that we're sharing with these legislators, is to tell them this is what it's like to live with this condition. This is what it should not be like. And we want the opportunity to have options for therapies. My kid may be doing well now, but what happens when he's not? Because I've seen that. So we go that far. And if it goes to the next question, so if the legislator or the staffer asks us questions about interactions with the FDA, or why did they not accept the NDA, while we may have had conversations with the company, it's not our place to answer that, because we're not the experts in that relationship. So we've kind of done a tag team. If Reenie's met with somebody, she said, I've met with this person, I think you need to hear what the patients are going through, and so has turned it over to us, because we're the experts in living with this. And when we've done a meeting, we've introduced the legislator or the staffer to ask them to listen to the challenges and the hurdles that the company is going through. And so it's really, I think, while we're both wanting, you know, we both want fair and equitable review, my conversations are just really hearsay, and I can't do justice to that conversation without turning it over to Reenie or somebody at Stell. So let the people who know what their interactions are, let them do that. Don't try to get in the middle of what the FDA conversations have been with the company. You talk about what your experience is, what it means to you to live with this condition, and what it would mean to you to have therapies, because we deserve therapies. Our kids deserve therapies. So we shouldn't be punished because we just happen to be unlucky enough to have an ultra rare condition.
Yeah, I think what you said is really important to remember, that, you know, that we're asking for a fair and equitable review, right? Like, we're not asking them to make the decision. We're asking for them to review. And I think it's really important too, what you said, Shelley, just about, as a patient, you know, our role is to share our experience, right? And I think that also too perhaps can make it a little less intimidating, that when you're going in and speaking with your legislator, you're not expected to know all of the science behind everything. You're not the scientist going in, unless you are the scientist going in, right? Then you can bring that to the table. But as a constituent, you know, like, our job is to share our voice, to share our story. And then also too, it's okay to pause. Like, if there's ever a question when you're talking to your legislator that you don't know the answer to, like, I always encourage people that that's okay. You can also let them know, I'm going to send a follow-up email and connect you with the right person to answer that question. So that also takes the burden off of, oh my gosh, what if I don't know all the answers of what they're going to ask? The most important thing is to show up and to share that this is an important issue. Kind of moving back and getting into some of the nitty gritty, we had some nitty gritty questions come in that I think will be helpful. Reenie, if you can address them. Somebody asked, did you have a pre-submission meeting with the FDA, and did they bring up biases at that time? And which review decision did you go to, or division? Which review division did you go to?
That's a whole nother story. So we've been in 4 different FDA review divisions since 2019. Feels like a little bit like a hot potato. We started in the Division of Neurology Products. Yes, there has been concern about bias with natural history review all along, but there also was no other suggestion that was made. In fact, we've had a half dozen or more trial designs rejected by FDA. And so, we did the natural history trial for that reason. FDA has consistently said objective data would help in the interpretability of that natural history trial. As I mentioned, there's been a 45% improvement in left ventricular stroke volume, as well as a nominally significant improvement in cardiolipin ratios. That still doesn't seem to be helping with the interpretability of the natural history review study data. But review division, we've been in neurology products, we've been in inborn errors of metabolism, we've been in rare disease and medical genetics, and we are now in cardiology.
So this question kind of, I think, filters into that, but I just want to make sure that it's answered as well. This particular person said, is there any chance that you could submit your NDA to the FDA group working on mitomyopathy? Also, if you know Elameprotide is approved for any condition, we will use it off label.
Right. So that's an interesting question. And thank you, Dr. Haas, for joining the webinar. We were in rare disease and medical genetics, but because of the emerging cardiac signal, the consult over to cardiology came up. So rare disease and medical genetics right now is where our mitomyopathy program sits. The interesting aspect of this question is that FDA has said, why don't you just forget about Barth? Well, I'm paraphrasing, but the FDA has said, maybe unethical to do another trial in Barth syndrome because it's so rare. We understand there are challenges with getting us comfortable with this data. Why don't you just go forward with the approval for mitochondrial myopathy once that data comes in, and then can't patients get it? I think the issue there really gets into a reimbursement issue, as well as, accessibility of the drug for patients with Barth syndrome. Not all doctors will prescribe off-label, and then whether or not reimbursement will occur is also a question mark. So yes, maybe that could be a path, but it's not really the optimal path for patient access.
I'm wondering, Shelley, if you could speak, you kind of already spoke a little bit about this, but can you speak a little bit more about, for the advocates that are watching today, whether they're a part of the Barth community or not, how can they best help advocate? And can you share a little bit about what will be on the website that will be released here in the coming weeks?
Yes, if they want to advocate, and we've only hit 27 states, we have 50. So I know Emily's she is on this call. She's probably fainted when I said this, but call us and we want to go forward. I would love to have people join us, or I can educate. I would love to be able to educate others on how you can reach, and little tricks that we've learned to be able to reach out and, to get the right person that will just give you an appointment and get through the process. It's sometimes just as easy as finding the right person who will just give you some time. But once you get that appointment, it's pretty easy, and it's so easy you don't even have to leave. You can just do Zoom meetings, unless you're Reenie and you're going to DC and you're going office to office. But we're able to stay home and do these meetings on Zoom meetings, and So just, reach out to me, and I'll put my email address in the chat after I finish talking, and you can also reach out to Mito Action and get my contact information. As far as our website, we are doing an actual timeline because I need to be able to go there at a glance and say, this is all we've done. And I think seeing a list of every interaction that has happened and what we have been through since 2014. I mean, it started slow, and getting the ball rolling. We heard about this. Actually, we heard about this drug on a Mito Action webinar that was done, back in the olden days. And so I heard this and I thought, my gosh, this is something that would be maybe helpful for, people with Barth syndrome. And reached out to Jerry Bockley and said, hey, I hear that you're doing this clinical trial. Do you think this would work? And so he reached out to Mito Action, or reached out to Stealth and said, hey, do you think this would work for, which I like. Actually, it was much easier. It was Mendavia back in the day, which was much easier to say. And so they said, yeah. So so we've got that. So we've got from the very beginning how this has worked. And, the thing is that to look at this from the very beginning, and I know I'm getting off track a bit, but I also look at it in terms of human toll. And this is ridiculous and brutal to see people that I know and care about beg people, elected officials, beg them, can you please go to the FDA and have them do what they have, the exercise the authority that they have been given, please, because I'm afraid my kid is going to die, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen in the future, and people should not have to beg. So having that timeline up on the website helps people see that we're not giving up. This is not just a phase for us. We are going to fight this because our people are dying. They are dying and they are getting worse. And that's not acceptable to us. So that's our website, and that's what we're doing on the Barth syndrome side. And so, Reenie, I think you're talking about we're doing another website where there are more details, and that goes into some of the things that have happened with Stealth and their timeline as well.
Yeah, and we'll get that information over to you probably in the next week or so. It should provide links to potentially write to FDA and or Congress and or, so I'm sure that'll be coming around.
So stay tuned. If you are listening to this and you want to get involved, there's going to be absolutely ways that you can get involved. You can start today by taking that, going to change.org and signing that petition and sending it to your friends. Get as many people because really a lot starts grassroots, right? So if you have 10 people that that can sign that petition, that's huge. And so just continue to work on that until the website comes, and we will be sending out an email with all of that information so you can contact your legislators and get in touch with the right people. We really, really appreciate everyone's love and care and support for this community and trying to work together, because we are all in this together. And with Mito, especially, we have to look out for each other with the rare diseases that we have. And so I think one more question, I just want to check. I think maybe one more question came through. No, let me just check real quick. So someone was trying to make the point that she said at BSF, we need to talk mostly about BTHS, but we are also very much framing our efforts as an ultra rare issue that affects many. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, Reenie.
Yeah, I think that was Kate just chiming in. It's the point I made. I think, we speak about Barth syndrome, but we say this is an issue that affects other ultra rare diseases. And Shelley and Emily and Kate are saying the same in their meetings. This isn't Barth syndrome, as one of the folks we work with on the Hill says, it's maybe one of the more egregious examples of kind of ultra rare diseases not getting the regulatory review they need, but it's certainly, unfortunately, not the only one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we all have to rally together and use our voices. So thank you guys
so much for this. Really, really appreciate it, and appreciate everyone who joined. Thank you.
And thank you guys so much for sharing your expertise, for your hard work and effort, and everything that you're doing. And if you're listening to this webinar today, or if you're listening in on it and it's after today, and you want to get in touch, feel free. You can email me at sharry@mitoaction.org. Harry is spelled Harry. You can also email Shelley Bowen, and we will make sure that you are, Shelley, it's SHELLEY.Bowen, BOWEN @barthsyndrome.org. And we'll make sure that you get the information that you need to advocate on behalf of this community, and keep posted, and look out in your emails, because in the future weeks, we'll be sending calls to action. And we just really, really appreciate everyone who's taken the time to learn more today. And if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with us. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Thank you.